In 2019, I was diagnosed with invasive carcinoma breast cancer. Well, to my knowledge, I was asked if I would be willing to donate my surgically removed breast cancer tissues to research. Well, you would be surprised at the reply and response that I got from my answer. The medical staff was shocked by my yes reply because they said Blacks do not donate their tissues to cancer research. Well, after a lot of Q&As, I honoredly signed all the papers and donated to cancer research. So we are Phyllis and Ron Garnett, and we are co-founders of the Garnett Cancer Society.
Cancer research disparities in the Black community is significantly below in margins compared to other non-Black brown communities. Why? That's a good question. Glad we asked. There are many answers, like late screenings, underinsured or non-insured, redlining, and due to a lack of Blacks donating their cancerous tissues to research. The research needed for response to various treatments and cures in the Black community is very, very, very low.
Mm-hmm. BlackInCancer co-founders, Ms. Sagoni Bell, who has previously worked in neuroscience and oncology, and is currently pursuing her PhD with her research centering on developing novel models and therapeutics for pediatrics brain tumors. And Dr. Henry Henderson III, who couldn't be with us today, but he is a postdoctoral research fellow in the Division of Hematology and Oncology, and a cancer biologist and health division and health promotion advocate. And I think Dr. Ms. Bell is going to be solo today. But together they have, and she will be providing information on the trajectory of research, deflating some common myths of cancer, and also providing studies and findings and much, much more pertaining to cancer research. So welcome, 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 Ms. Sagoni Bell. We are so glad to have you with us today. I have been looking forward to this for a long, long time.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, yes. And so, after my husband, Ron, and I were informed of the low percentage of Blacks donating to cancer research, I started Googling and looking for Black cancer research centers. And I initially started looking for them in the greater Kansas City area where we live. But then I came across BlackInCancer's website. And I said, what? Oh my goodness. So I read everything about the co-founders, you and Dr. Henderson, and I read everything that I could in reference to the various researchers, scientists that are affiliated with BlackInCancer. And you know what, I'm going to share something here on the screen because I even read about you guys in the media. Can you see that? With Forge?
Yeah.
Yeah. And also with the University of Minnesota Medical School. So when I saw all of this about you guys, I was just ecstatic. So I shared it with my husband, Ron. We took it to the Garnett Cancer Society nonprofit board. The board members were ecstatic. We were excited about what we were reading. And so we said, yes, we've got to find a way to connect with them. So I contacted you all. You have been so gracious to respond. And so we wanted to have this meeting and find a way to partner with BlackInCancer and also to let our community know what's out there, who's out there, and what they can do to help and be a huge benefit to Black cancer research. So thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
It's our pleasure. It really is.
Great. So I'm just going to jump right in, and I would like to hear from you. How did you get into this awesome, awesome field of cancer research? And then how did you and Dr. Henderson come together as co-founders for BlackInCancer?
Sure. So my journey into cancer research wasn't a smooth one. it wasn't actually a thing that I always wanted to do. So I've always been interested in science. I did my undergraduate degree in human physiology. So it's understanding how the body works, why it works the way it does. And then from then just had a real interest in the human body.
Mm-hmm.
So why it works the way it does, what drugs can we work to create to help prevent disease?
Mm-hmm.
How can we fix some of the things that are going wrong? And at that point, I took a real interest in how the brain works, because it was amazing to think that all of our thoughts and ideas about the world and everything else is contained within our heads.
Yes.
That was just incredible to me. So I had a real interest in neuroscience. And then moving forward, so I finished my degree. I then worked for a pharmaceutical company in their like neuroscience and pain department. And then they closed. And then during that year, although she by that point had it for 8 years, my aunt was diagnosed with terminal breast cancer. And that really shook our family. We were so close, despite her being based in Florida, where some of my family are. We had such a close relationship, and it was really hard to see her at the end of an incredible battle that she'd had over 8 years. And then I had the opportunity to move into oncology, to work for another pharmaceutical company. So I moved into that, and spent kind of the first year of like figuring out about cancer, and expanding my knowledge on that, and seeing her journey. And I was talking about it, and she would send me her results from her tests and stuff and be like, what does this mean? What does this mean? And we talk about it. And that was really, it was the way I felt that I could help. It was the only way I knew how to help from so far away. So then moving forward from there, spent another 3.5 years working for the same pharmaceutical company. And then I moved on to start my PhD, which I now do. I'm in my second year, and I work on a rare form of children's brain tumor called supratentorial ependymoma, which took me a long time to learn how to say.
I understand.
So I work on this rare type of children's brain tumor, developing new models and new drugs and new chemotherapy agents to help these children, because currently there is no effective chemotherapies for them. So they either have to have radiotherapy if they're over the age of 2, and surgery, and that's their only options.
Wow.
So working on that and being able to, at least if it's not perfect the first time we develop it, if it's going to help, if it's going to extend a life, if it's going to mean that a child has more quality of life to be able to spend with their family, with their siblings, for their parents to have more time with them, that's really important to me.
Right.
So that's kind of my journey and how I got to where I am. But obviously last summer was a real challenge for everybody.
Yes.
But a lot of racial tension really came to the surface last year. And I'm sure we don't have to tell the story again. There was also another incident that happened on the same day with a guy called Christian Cooper in Central Park. And he was accused of doing something that he didn't. He was out bird watching.
That's right.
To a real movement on social media about how Black people are treated within science and STEM subjects. So that started off an initial, what was known as Black Birders Week. So a lot of people who bird watch and who are interested in ornithology got together to talk about their experiences, things that have happened to them, but also their love of the science, their love of birds. But from then it moved on into other STEM fields. So there was a Black in Neuro Week, Black in Cardio, and a range of others. So I was looking for my own kind of community on Twitter. And one of our friends who is on the committee, Dr. Keelan Bishop, she put out a tweet asking to, oh, is there any other Black cancer biologists out there? So I came across it and was like, oh, I am. And Henry was there too. And then we started connecting, and Henry and I started a conversation. We started DMing each other. And then ended up having a conversation about what it was like to be a Black cancer researcher and what the important things were. So one of them being the lack of visibility. We didn't know anybody who was doing what we were doing, who looked like us. I didn't meet a Black woman with a PhD until I started my PhD, which was 10 years after I'd started my undergraduate degree.
Wow.
So by that point, I worked for 3 different pharmaceutical companies and had been in 1 academic institution. And I had still never met somebody who looked like me, who was doing what I wanted to do. So we talked about the challenges. We talked about the challenges that brings, but then also talked about something that was really important to us, which was our own communities. And the fact that actually it's a real challenge to be able to communicate everything about cancer to our own families. I had the experience of trying to talk to my aunt about breast cancer, but that's not what I was working on. I wasn't the expert. So I was trying to gather as much information as I could. And it's known that we take information more readily from people who look like us. It's just a fact. And especially within the Black community, with all of the things that have happened in the past around medical racism and so on and so forth, of course, it's understandable why we would take information from people who look like us. So what we wanted to do was to create a space where people could get the information in the right way, that is in a way that they can understand, that's culturally competent. So things that are specific to Black culture, that are specific to our communities, that we'll be able to talk about those in the right way so that people have the right level of information and they can go away informed. We have this slogan at BlackInCancer that an informed community is an empowered community. We want to empower our own community to be able to make the healthcare decisions and to make the decisions that are right for them, and to be able to advocate for themselves in the clinic and all of those things, because that's just so important. Because even though we're working to change it, but an immediate change isn't going to happen in the healthcare system.
Very true.
What can we do from our side to make sure that we're at least able to advocate for ourselves and make the right decisions and push for the right information and connect, Black cancer patients with Black oncologists, with Black registered nurses, with Black oncology nurses, to be able to get that information in a way that's palatable to them, so that then they can move forward with the right treatment, the right care, and survive their cancer and start to get rid of some of these disparities.
And so I'm just going to ask you to do a rewind on your statement. An informed community is a
empowered community.
Empowered community.
Yeah,
that's what we're all about. That's what we're all about, empowering. Thank you.
That's powerful.
So
your primary function as BlackInCancer would be what? What would you say that would be?
Community in all aspects of whatever that means. So it's building the science community, building the advocacy community, as well as the medical community, and bringing all of those together means that we can get the best flow of information, and means that everybody is informed, empowered, and can go on to do whatever they want to do, whether that's patients going on to live a full life because they can survive their cancer, whether that's scientists being able to have people to aspire to and to go on to do the research that they want to do, or whether that's medics and seeing other Black oncologists, but also them being able to communicate with patients and advocacy groups. So community is at the center of everything that we do.
I see. And what would be your vehicle for getting this information out to?
So we have a range of ways. Some things through collaborations, for example. So we have a partnership with the FDA that is happening this summer. There's National Black Family Cancer Awareness Week, which is happening in June.
Really?
So we're working with them to develop some programs and initiatives to communicate, and because it's over that weekend of Juneteenth, where a lot of families get together to talk about whatever they want to talk about, just to get together, right, and celebrate. That it's a time where people can have those conversations, that they can prompt those conversations about cancer or about family history, or all of these things that are so important for us to know moving forwards, that will really help in that informed and empowered and therefore able to advocate for ourselves.
I see.
So, Miss Bell, is that going to be viral, or how will that
I
be?
hope so. So yeah, the information is out on, so it's on the FDA Oncology Center of Excellence website. So we'll be tweeting about it soon as well from our Twitter, and some bits and pieces will go on our website. But that's, you can see information about that through the FDA Oncology Twitter page as well.
Okay.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
great.
Okay. Yeah.
So where are you guys actually located? Do you have
You have a base? Are you brick and mortar, or are you primarily virtual?
We are primarily virtual right now. So I'm obviously, well, maybe not so obviously, I'm in the UK. So I'm in Cambridge.
Yeah, we kind of gathered that.
so beautiful, such a beautiful accent. I love it.
And Dr. Henderson is in Tennessee.
Okay.
And then all of our committee, all of our board of directors are based in several places around either the UK or the US. And we're slowly building that to be other places in the world as well, which is amazing. So at the moment, we don't have an office. Actually, Henry and I have never met in real life.
Oh, is that right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I've never met him in person. A lot of trust placed over the internet.
Yeah.
But yeah, so actually, the entire board of directors and the organizing committee, I've never met a single one of them in person.
Huh.
Wow. Isn't it amazing what we can do with technology these
right.
days?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're working towards becoming a nonprofit, and obviously that will be in the States. So that process is in motion. But obviously, as we all have, we're all either undergraduate, grad students, or Henry's just started a new job. It's doing that in the behind the scenes, evenings, weekends, and it takes a lot of time and effort and all of those kinds of things. So, whilst trying to work and do grad school too. So we're getting there.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
How long have you been functioning as an organization?
Surprisingly, seeing as the amount of things we've done, actually only since August of 2020.
You've got to be kidding.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you've accomplished a lot.
Yeah, I just want to tell the audience, you need to go to BlackInCancer's website, because just to say you've been doing this for not even a full year yet.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You have done so much. So when I was reading your website, and I was looking at all of the scientists that are involved, I mean, I think I know of at least 7 different type of scientists, like biology, biomed. It looks like you guys have covered the playing field with everyone. Will you please tell us a little bit about the specifics of each scientist that is a part of BlackInCancer, meaning there's the categories?
Okay, I can try.
Okay.
We all work on a bunch of different things. So
yes.
So I work in pediatric brain cancer. So developing therapies for children. Henry works on what's known as non-small cell lung cancer. So his work is around this very specific mutation called EGFR. And working on, so we currently have a therapy that works for EGFR mutant lung cancer, but unfortunately over time we become resistant. So his work was working around how do those mechanisms start to happen, and how can we prevent those from happening, or how can we develop new treatments that we can use after it becomes resistant, to prevent it spreading and things. Okay, who else is there? I'm trying to think about board of directors versus our organizing committee as well. So Dr. Corey Grayson, she is a biomedical engineer. So her work is around developing, I God, there's so many people and they work on so many different things. It's
Yes.
hard to remember everybody's specific field. But she's a biomedical engineer, and a lot of hers is around developing devices that will help during treatment. So like nanomedicines, so how we can deliver things directly to tumors, so on and so forth.
Okay. Yeah, because I think that knowing the specifics to the categories, like you just said, biomedical, some people don't know that has to do with, mechanics and then, like you said, to how to provide that treatment. And what was another one I was thinking of? I'm trying to say it.
Malignant.
Molecular.
Molecular.
Biology.
Molecular biologist.
Yeah.
So our molecular biologists work. So if you think about things on like a scale, so whether that's a whole organism, so like whether that's a whole person or a mouse or whatever that looks like, down to a specific organ, down to a specific tissue, so that's parts of an organ, down to a cell. So molecular biologists work purely on the things within the cell. So they look at specific proteins, how they interact with one another, where things are moving within a cell, where things get mutated and change. So then if that happens, what happens downstream of that? So if this changes and it, instead of it being like this, it's like this, which means that this other protein then can't bind, which means that because of the way that our cells work and they're so perfectly constructed almost, when we have mechanisms to prevent things from going wrong, but obviously things slip through the gap. And when they do, it means that what should be absolutely fine in a normal situation, so we have particular proteins that allow our cells to divide, because we obviously need our cells to divide, but sometimes imagine if you open and shut a door, but suddenly somebody puts a door stop in and you can't shut the door anymore. So what happens is that continues to happen irrespective of whether you want it or not. So then that's how things like cancer can start to form, because where you were able to previously shut the door and say, okay, we're done with this, it leaves the door open for the cells to continually divide, and then that's where things can get a bit out of control. So molecular biologists work on that very small level to see what's happening within a specific cell.
Yeah. And so it sounds like that each category of scientists then will kind of cover every area of cancer. I know that there's a scientist that works with breast cancer. I did see that. Pancreatic cancer. Any time forms of cancer that we may not be aware of?
I think I probably work on the rarest type of cancer. But I don't think that, I think everybody else works on either lung, breast, prostate, colorectal. Actually, to be honest, ones that predominantly affect the Black community. Yeah, that's what majority of our, and ovarian as well, and cervical.
Yes.
Tends to be what majority of our group work on, because they affect so many people.
Okay.
So yeah, but there are researchers out there that do every part of every type of cancer. I talked about non-small cell lung cancer, that's EGFR mutant, but there are so many other smaller subtypes within there. There's small cell lung cancer. There's so many different ones, which is why we wanted to bring the community together, because I'm not an expert on, Henry probably couldn't tell you a great deal about small cell lung cancer because he works on non-small cell. So it's bringing all of those expertise together to build this network that means if I don't know something, I know who to ask.
So what? Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's just like, if I'd had this network when my aunt was diagnosed, it would have made a huge difference. I would have felt more confident in the conversations I was having with her, and I would have been able to be like, okay, well, I don't know this, and instead of being like, well, I'm going to try and piece this together when I read the information as a scientist, I can go to somebody who can be like, okay, right, this is why they're giving this, blah, blah, blah. And speak to oncologists and stuff and just feel more informed and therefore more empowered.
Right.
Well, our condolences go to you in the loss of your aunt. What a courageous woman I'm sure she was. And then you as well to follow in the footsteps of being courageous to find an answer, to be able to help someone else. And that's what this is all about. So thank you so much.
So what would be the qualifications then of a person who wanted to become a part of your group?
So I suppose one thing that we've really tried to do is make sure that our board of directors, because obviously we have kind of two main initiatives. So one we call the BlackInCancer Pipeline Program, which is about bringing more young Black STEM students into cancer research. And then the other side is what we call the Cancer Awareness Project. So that's around educating the community about cancer. So what we're trying to do is because our focus of our board of directors is obviously everybody is passionate about both things, but we've made sure that we are encouraging the generation coming up to give them something to aspire to. So our board of directors is made up only of early career researchers. So whether they are undergraduate, graduate students, or people who have just moved out of postdocs or just starting their career, to give them opportunities to network, to build their CVs, because we know how important those things are.
Yes.
And we can't underestimate those to be able to go far. But what we also have is an advisory board of people who are well into their careers, who are Black academics, who help us in terms of making decisions, guidance and things, which is really important. And what we're just starting to do is to bring in advocates. So we work alongside, I don't know whether you've heard of them, the Tiger Lily Foundation, run by an incredible woman called May Makamo. And her organization is about empowering women, and in particular young women with breast cancer and with metastatic breast cancer. And she's been doing some incredible work over the last few years. So we work in collaboration with her and get her viewpoint and insight on some of the things that we're doing. But yes, our aim as we move forward and as we build is to make sure that our organization is built up not only of kind of people who are on the research side, but also people who are advocates, because we can't tell you we can do our best, but we can't tell you how to advocate better than somebody who's had to advocate for themselves.
Right.
They know what it's like to be in that doctor's office when you've had this life-changing thing that's a diagnosis, and tell you, do you know what, this is how you have to do this. This is going to be a challenge. This is going to be hard, but this is how I got through it, or this is how we're going to get through it together. Because we as researchers can't pretend to know that experience. We've seen it. A lot of us have seen it from the outside. We've been a family member, we've been a friend, but we haven't been the patient. And it's so important that patient voices are heard, because you're the ones who are impacted by it.
Right. Do you work with any major medical institutions at all?
So we're starting to. So everything is kind of a build and a work in progress. So part of what we do is working with so we're building some collaborations with some foundations who have research institutes. We've actually got a lot of uptake from some universities that have cancer centers. We were sponsored, so BlackInCancer Week, which happened in October of last year.
How did that go?
It was incredible, beyond our wildest dreams. This is how we ended up in Forbes for the stuff we were doing over the week. So that was amazing. And we actually got sponsored. The week was sponsored by Cancer Research UK, who are the biggest funder of cancer research outside of the US. They also, as a single organization, fund 50% of cancer research in the whole of the UK.
Wow.
So that's great.
And they actually sponsored me to do my PhD. So I got in contact with them, and yeah, they were like, we think this is great. How can we help? How can we support? And they've been really helping us to move forward with that as well. We also got some funding from Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center, which was amazing, and some other organizations. So yeah, people are on board, and we're slowly building that and slowly building those connections and those partnerships for them to be not just transient for, you know, a moment and just for like a small movement, but long lasting collaborations that means that we can really start to see some change, not just for a moment, but for a lifetime.
Right. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, that is great. That is great. You know, what would a person that's interested in finding the cure to cancer, what would they need to study?
So there are a range of different things that you can be in terms of cancer research. You don't always have to be a biologist. And that's the thing that I think people think, oh, you must have to be a biologist. If you're a chemist and you're really interested in chemicals and making new compounds, that's an absolutely fantastic way. Somebody's got to have that expertise to make those drugs, to then give them to the biologist for them to try, so on and so forth. There are people who are physicists, who work on really cool ways to help early diagnosis, for example, because we know that early diagnosis really helps outcomes.
Right.
The earlier you're diagnosed, the more likely you are to survive your cancer. So if you're interested in physics, it's an amazing opportunity to get involved in some of that work in terms of imaging. How can we detect tumors, so on and so forth. You know, mathematicians, computational biologists, who look at data from biologists and put it all together into a bigger picture. There are so many things you can be involved in. Science policy is an amazing thing, because as much as we do the work, unless things change in policy, nothing's going to move.
Nothing happens.
So being involved in science policy is an incredible way to go to be able to help. So there are so many ways that you can be involved in cancer research. And that's something that's really important to us to be able to show, because people think that unless they are a scientist, that they can't be helpful on the journey, but you can, wherever you are, whatever you're interested in, whatever your skill set is, you can be involved in helping us to get to the cure.
Wow. So I understand that BlackInCancer has an internship program. And what do you look for in an intern? How can you determine and detect if they're the right fit for BlackInCancer's program? And then also, do they have mentors during that term, and how long is the program?
So this is something that we're kind of building at the moment. So the program that we have currently is a postdoctoral fellowship. So basically, for somebody who has finished their PhD, and often you go into what's called a postdoctoral role, which is just after your PhD, but before you are what's known as a principal investigator. So you run your own lab and you have your own students and so on and so forth. So what we've done is, in collaboration with a foundation, we have this pot of money, which is for a postdoc for 3 years. So they will get $75,000 of funding a year. And if they secure a faculty position, they then get $100,000 to start their lab.
Wow.
So for them to buy equipment, you know, to start paying a student or whatever that might look like. The way in which they spend that money is flexible. But yes, so that's what we wanted to start to do, because in terms of increasing the pipeline of students, how can we do that? By encouraging them to stay. And if they're having a challenge to get these fellowships from organizations such as the NCI or from Cancer Research UK over here, or wherever that might be, we're creating an opportunity for Black students to be able to do that themselves, which we're really, really excited about. And it's an innovative piece of work, because some people are doing some amazing work out there and it's just not seen, or it's not being recognized. That we wanted to create this fellowship for somebody to be able to do the research that they are passionate about, that they love, that we see and think, yeah, that's amazing. And we think that that could go really far.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's wonderful. And I know every little bit helps, but that's a lot of little bit.
Yeah.
That's a big little bit.
That's right.
I know, right?
Okay. So Dr. Bell, I have some questions here from the audience. One of the questions is, has research proven that cell phones, computers, laptops, and microwaves cause cancer?
No. So unfortunately, actually, these devices haven't been around a long time. So it's so hard to be like, you know, oh, yeah, this definitely does this, in the same way as, you know, many other things. And sometimes they're things that you can only see over a longer period. But for example, for the amount of time that microwaves have been around, for example, there hasn't been a huge peak in cancer that seems to be linked to that, for example. So it's hard, like in science, it's hard to say anything categorically. But is there this high correlation between people who have a microwave and people who get cancer? No.
Okay. The next question, because there are three right here. The next question is, can Blacks contract skin cancer from the sun? And do we need to have sunscreen? If so, why and what type?
Do we need to have sunscreen? Absolutely. Absolutely. If you are not currently wearing sunscreen and you are out in the sun, living your best life, please put sunscreen on. Please. Yes, it's Black people can get skin cancer. And I don't want that to be seen as a thing that just doesn't happen to us. It might be less likely, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So what we should be doing in all circumstances is protecting ourselves as best we can. It's always better to reduce your cancer risk in all situations, whether that's through using sunscreen and not being out in direct sunlight, whether that's thinking about your diet, whatever that looks like, you know, taking exercise, just looking after your body in the best way that you can. And part of that is protecting the skin that you're in. And, you know, we're not, as human beings, we aren't that different. So we all have a chance of contracting the same diseases. Some might be more likely than others, but it certainly doesn't make it impossible. So yes, to whoever that is or whoever is watching who isn't wearing sunscreen, please wear sunscreen. I wear sunscreen. I push my parents to wear sunscreen when we're on holiday, and I'm like, please just put it on. It's so important, because you would rather be like, oh, I have to spend money on all this sunscreen than I now have to spend money on my medical care because I have melanoma.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And I know that usually when we're out in the sun, and especially when we're out of the country and the sun is a lot beamer than here, we always wear sunscreen. And I think that the SPF is 30 or higher that Blacks should wear.
Yeah.
Okay. Third question. Okay, so I've heard you mention, and I've also heard this on a panel talk. I keep hearing the word STEM, like encouraging others to be in STEM. What is STEM?
That's so funny. We often use these terms and don't necessarily think about the audience and whether they understand that. So STEM for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So it's the range of fields that people kind of see as the mathsy, sciencey stuff. So we just kind of shorten it to STEM. Some people add on an extra M, so it's science, technology, engineering, medicine, and maths. Or maths and medicine, I should say. I don't want to annoy the mathematicians out there. But yes, so that's what it means. So into those types of subjects, I guess, as opposed to arts type subjects.
I see.
Okay, great. STEM. I'll remember that.
So what kinds of advancements have you made thus far in cancer research as an organization?
Well, we're obviously very new as an organization. But in terms of I think it's been stimulating the conversation around disparities. That although so much research, particularly in the US, is done into disparities, people still don't recognize that that's a thing. They don't realize that, for example, Black women are 5 times more likely to die of triple negative breast cancer than any other ethnic group. And when they hear that, they're like, oh, wow. And you're like, yeah. And that's not necessarily down to biological differences. So I think a lot of it has been getting the information out there, but also helping people to understand what symptoms there are of cancer. You know, encouraging people to get checked up with things that they're concerned about, and not just leaving it. You know, helping, you know, bringing in either patients or survivors who have had, you know, tests that people don't particularly like to go for, whether that's going for, you know, as a woman going for a smear test, that it's an uncomfortable thing and people don't like to go for it. But if you realize how much going for a smear test has impacted somebody's life before they even had symptoms, that they were able to get that diagnosed and know about it. Similarly with men and prostate exams, you know, encouraging the community to see these things as important, and take care of their health, and not just be like, I'll be fine, because sometimes it isn't fine. Sometimes it isn't okay.
That's right.
And we have to do our best to look after our health, because the sooner we get it diagnosed, the better.
Right. Very true.
So yeah, everything that we've been doing at the moment has really been pushing for that. But as time goes on, and we have, you know, the BlackInCancer postdoc, and once they're doing their work and other things that we're hoping to kind of get the ball rolling on, hopefully we'll start to see some progression because of the work that we're doing.
Yeah. Now, do you and Dr. Henderson III and other scientists there at BlackInCancer, we know that clinical trials are very important and needed. Do you all participate and or work with clinical trials? And if so, what would that look like?
So actually, none of us work in clinical trials, but we know people who do within the BlackInCancer kind of network.
Okay.
So we've been, you know, vocal about making sure that if people have the opportunity, it's not to say that you must do the clinical trial, but it's understanding what clinical trials are, how do they work, you know, what are the benefits from being in a clinical trial, and how that information doesn't just, or being involved doesn't just impact on you, but impacts on the future. And people being treated in the future. Unfortunately, there's a real lack of diversity in clinical trials, which negatively impacts on our community because we're not involved in the clinical trials. So whether there are biological differences, which means it'll work slightly different on someone from a Black background as opposed to another background, if we're not involved, those things don't come to light. And then when treatments maybe don't work as well on someone from our community, so on and so forth, then we have the issue of like, well, why doesn't it work on us? Like, oh, they're designing things that aren't made for us. It's like, but we didn't get involved when they tested it. And this is why it's really hard for them to answer that question when they don't have that data in the first place. Which is why these things are really important.
Yeah, I know I had someone, a friend and I, we were talking about our experience with cancer and donating. And she was involved in a clinical trial, and she shared a reaction that she had to chemo, and it wasn't put in a report. And she was pretty concerned why they didn't include that. And it was because it was like she was the 1%. I mean, I don't even know if it's smaller than the 1%. I mean, it was just her, and they didn't have anyone else of color to, you know, include with that. And so they didn't report it. Is there a certain percentage that needs to be present in order for it to be reported?
So I think some of the challenges with being in a tiny minority when it comes to clinical trials is when we're identifying something and there's only one of you, where they try to keep anonymity within clinical trials. It's now obvious that it's you. If that makes sense. And that's the absolute opposite point of clinical trials. Everything is meant to be anonymous and what we call double-blinded. So neither the physician nor you know whether you've had the treatment, so on and so forth. So when you do have such a small number of people from a minority group, it then means it's immediately obvious that it's you, if that makes sense. For the same reason as that when we think about reporting, number of people who receive funding, for example, when people can use that data and then narrow it down and be like, oh, well, it must be this specific person that got that funding from here. That's not how this is meant to work. And it brings in bias, it brings in all sorts that we don't want.
I know that it sounds as though your main emphasis is in cancer as far as African Americans are concerned. But are you, does it go beyond that? Is your scope broader than that?
For now, no.
Okay.
Reason being, in not just the UK, not just the US, the Black community is always disproportionately affected by cancer. And it's not that we have increased rates of cancer, or we can have increased rates of certain types of cancer, but it's even the cancers that we have that are in line with every other ethnic group. We still aren't surviving as much as every other ethnic group. So our group clearly needs to be a focus right now, which is why that's where our focus is, and that's where what we're trying to work on. If it gets to a point where everybody is surviving the same, there's no need for BlackInCancer. And if there wasn't a need for BlackInCancer, that would be amazing. I'll just work on everybody's cancer and be like, hey, okay, right, we're all on a level playing field, let's go. But we're not on a level playing field.
That's true.
And it's something that needs to be highlighted and talked about.
So cancer research is successful. Would you say it is successful? In some ways,
yes. Yeah, there are plenty of people who get diagnosed with cancer but still go on to live a full life. There are some people who get diagnosed with cancer but don't die of their cancer. They still live to old age and live lives that are full. And it's definitely making progress, and people are surviving longer with their cancer, which is brilliant. We're not at a point where people just don't have cancer anymore, and their cancer is completely cured and will never come back. That's probably still a long way away, and a lot of technology away in all sorts. But at least if we can have people surviving longer with their cancer, that's a great first step.
I have a question. Now, earlier we talked about STEM in a different way. The science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine. But I have a question about STEM cells.
Okay.
So will you explain how STEM cells are used, if they are used in cancer research, and how are they beneficial?
Oh, okay, big question. So if I start with what stem cells are, so all cells usually start from one point, which is a stem cell. And what they have is the ability to become any type of cell. So it has the ability to become a cell in the lung, or a cell in the liver, or a cell in the brain. It has all of these possibilities. And depending on where they are and what signals they're receiving, go what we call down a particular lineage. So they become For example, a brain cell, it doesn't just suddenly go from being a stem cell to a brain cell. There are steps along the way. There are different cells that it becomes, and they go through a process that's known as differentiation. So they become different to one another, and you end up with all of these different chains and branches of different types of cells, which all perform different functions. So what happens in some cancers is that those really differentiated cells take on a more what we call stem-like state. So they regress and become more like a stem cell, which gives them all manner of capabilities. But they're not doing it in the way that it's intended. So where they have that ability to split and become lots of different cells, they maintain that. They start putting proteins on the surface that cause particular pathways to be overstimulated and can result in the growth of a cancer. Stem cells inherently aren't bad. They're not bad things. They're really great, and they're the reason we're all here. But things regressing to a stem-like state and becoming like stem cells when they weren't meant to be, so on and so forth, can lead to real issues. And then that's where changes in stem cells during development, for example, so the children's brain cancer I work on, there's an error that happens in a stem cell during development, and that's why we have children with tumors. Children with tumors is actually fairly rare in comparison to the adult population, but obviously still happens. So there are ways that we can manipulate stem cells to work in our favor. A lot of new cancer research works on how we can manipulate the immune system to tackle our own cancers as well, in that sometimes there are proteins on the surface that aren't normally there. So what we can do is look at those and be like, okay, this means that this cell shouldn't be here. So we can use the immune system in the same way that we do for vaccinations, for example, to identify proteins that shouldn't be there. We can do the same thing for cancer and be like, this protein's on the surface of this cell, shouldn't be there. We think it means it's cancer, so we're going to get rid of it. So that's how a lot of new technologies are working, and how we harness things in the body that already work in a brilliant way against cancer in the first place.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have a few more questions from the audience. The first question is, has cancer research improved over the last 10 to 15 years?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's brand new technologies that are happening all the time. The progression in us understanding how DNA works, how specific mutations or specific changes in DNA can cause cancers, how we can start to prevent those changes, or how we can start to counteract those changes with new chemotherapies. Again, like the immunotherapy I explained, that's worked for a lot of people with lung cancer, for example. So there are lots of new technologies that are coming out, and brilliant things around early detection, which are amazing. So taking blood samples and detecting tiny bits of what we call circulating tumor DNA. So bits of your tumor might come off into your bloodstream, and the DNA from that we can find within the blood, and then they can find out, is your tumor still there at all? Is the chemotherapy working? Is there less of this circulating DNA in your blood, which may mean that the chemotherapy is working? All of those experiments are becoming more and more sensitive every day with all the research that's going on. So yeah, it's just expanding and expanding. It's amazing the work that's being done all over the world.
Oh, that's great. That's great. The second question is, what types of cancer get the most funding, and which types of cancer get the least funding? And I believe we're speaking in reference to research, as far as research is concerned.
So typically the ones that are most common get the most funding. So the kind of what we mentioned, so It tends to be breast, lung, colorectal, sometimes prostate cancer. A lot of those tend to get a lot of funding. It's usually the rarer cancers that get significantly less. I know, for example, brain tumors don't get a lot of funding. Specifically, pediatric brain tumors don't get a ton of funding. So it all just goes on the number of people, and then I guess the need for treatments for those diseases. So yeah, so it all just, yeah, it depends. It tends to be the most common that get the most funding.
Okay. The next question is, have there been any specific findings of cancer concerning genetics due to interracial genetic crossings?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
I couldn't categorically say either way.
Oh, okay. Okay, then are Blacks prone to getting one type of cancer over another type? And if yes, why would that be?
So yes, so Black men are more likely to get prostate cancer. This isn't, as far as I'm aware, I'd have to probably ask my prostate cancer friends. There isn't a clear reason why at this point. And it's the same with colorectal cancer, that Black people are more likely to get colorectal cancer. Part of that may be down to dietary things, but there isn't a clear cut, oh, we have this gene, which means we're just more likely to get this, as far as I'm aware.
Okay. I think I have one last question, and it it says, where does your cancer research money go? How is it used?
Okay, so can be used for a number of things. So if I think about what I do in my day-to-day, and where I guess where I spend money, so it might be on, I mean, majority of things we spend are on reagents, so things to do experiments, whether that's media that we use to grow cells, so that's like special liquids that contain everything that cells require, whether that's equipment, so obviously a lot of the stuff we do needs to stay sterile. So we get through lots of plasticware, making sure that everything that we do is clean. Even boring things like we still got to buy gloves to be able to do experiments, to protect ourselves. Like there's so many things that are involved in just doing a simple experiment. Whether that's looking at samples, so making, we've got to make sure we have the equipment to be able to do that. So microscopes, the things that we need to like take sections from bits of tissue or bits of organ, whether that's from a human, whether that's from an animal, whatever, or cells that we put on a slide, to be able to look at those underneath the microscope. The experiments we do, we use lots of kind of things like antibodies for experiments that we have to buy in, and they can be really expensive. So there's lots of things that we need to be able to just do even the simplest of experiments. And those costs really rack up.
I can imagine.
Within a day,
Right.
And then all the technology, the things we need to do, the systems we need to use to analyze data, to then create graphs, all of that kind of stuff, to then, be able to discuss and put our data out there. When you submit a publication, so once you've got a whole piece of work and it makes a beautiful story about how something works, and you submit that to a journal for publication, you usually have to pay to submit to the journal for your research to be out there. So that's another cost. There's all manner of things that come into just one piece of work. And often it's not just one experiment that you do that proves a point. You have to look at all of the caveats around, okay, well, that particular experiment shows this, but maybe there's this other bit that it could be working like that. So now we have to prove that that's not how that's happening. So it's never just one thing. It's always a whole huge story.
Out of one experiment could come multiple, 20 or more.
Right.
So lots of money.
Lots of money.
Right.
Lots of money.
Yeah. Earlier, you touched on diversity. And I would like to know, are there any challenges within BlackInCancer concerning diversity development and inclusion? Meaning, like, are you experiencing that from other research centers or?
So a lot of them are looking to us for how they can be more diverse and inclusive environments for our own network. So that's some of the work that we're doing with cancer centers and with organizations and with, you know, journals and so on and so forth, to make sure that they really know how to create and foster environments that are diverse and that are also inclusive, and that it's not just about bringing in Black students or Black employees, but how do you support them whilst they're there? How do you create an environment that's conducive to the way that they work, that is that they feel comfortable, that they feel supported, so that they can go on and do their best work.
Yeah. So in accepting and supporting each other in diversity, what one advice would you give?
To not think of diversity as a tick box. So often it's, you know, oh, well, you know, we've got this person in our team. It's remembering that Black people are not a monolith. We're not all the same.
Right.
We don't all have the same experiences. Just because one person feels comfortable in your group or tells you they feel comfortable, but maybe don't feel comfortable, but don't feel comfortable to tell you that they don't feel comfortable. Doesn't mean that suddenly somebody else who comes in, it's like, oh, well, blah, blah, it's fine. You don't know that.
Right.
Have you had a conversation with them? Have you made that environment where they can tell you if something has made them feel uncomfortable or whatever that might look like? So I think it's a number of things that kind of play in, but remembering that it's not a tick box, that it's not just, oh, well, we have this person, so that's great. How are you supporting that person? Does that person want to stay in this environment, or are they just there because it's an opportunity and it was hard to get others, or whatever that might look like? Is the environment what it needs to be for your minority student to thrive and not just to survive?
I like that. I like that diversity is not a checkbox. Not a checkbox. That takes us back to an informed community. It's an empowered community. So that is so awesome. You know, I know that honey, did you have another question?
No.
You know, we could go on and on. I could, because I'm a science buff. I love all of this. And I know we could go on for another hour.
Well, maybe I did have one more question before we go. And this should be a fairly simple question. And really, what I just like to know what you would like to leave with the audience as a result of our interview today.
I think the biggest thing is have conversations from whichever community you're from, whether you're not within the Black community. Have conversations about diversity, have the uncomfortable conversations about what we can start to do about health disparities, about medical racism. Have those conversations, because unless we start and continue that momentum, what can we do? We need help from everybody. And to the Black community, I would say, if you're worried about something, please get tested. Use the resources that you have. You know, if you need to reach out to BlackInCancer because you actually want to find a Black oncologist, whatever that might look like, we'll do our best to help you.
Mm.
But please get checked out. Ask the questions you need to. Reach out to advocacy groups if you don't know what questions to ask, and somebody will help you. Just make sure you get checked up if there is something you are concerned about, more than anything else. Get that early diagnosis.
Oh,
Yes,
great,
yes,
great.
yes. Present to them, please get checked out.
Yes, yes. Now, we just in finding out more and more about BlackInCancer, we have well, we're just really inspired by
Yes.
what you're doing,
Mhm.
and of course, when you're inspired, you'd like to do something to possibly help move that along. And so what the Garnet Cancer Society wants to do is make a donation to BlackInCancer, and that donation would be a $500 donation.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
We'd like to make that to you.
Yes. And so as you see the check here displayed, we will definitely have this in your accounts, in the BlackInCancer account. And we are so appreciative for what you have done, what you are doing, and what you will continue to do. And as I always say, you don't know how much your support is needed until support is your only choice. We don't want that to be our only choice.
Yeah.
We want to support and help now. Thank you so very much to you and to Dr. Henry Henderson III. We missed you today.
But you handled it well.
Yes, you did.
I do my best.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Ms. Sogomville from BlackInCancer.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.